What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dragon Ninja Dojo. This one is going to be it's obvious for me. It's giving it to Vegeta. They say Future Gohan versus Vegeta is really unfair. It really is, and yeah, I want to see what he say about it. I like this channel so far. I'm liking the commentary that I can provide for it. So support this channel. Again, I'm gonna leave the link in the description for this video. You want to check this video out without my commentary, I'm gonna leave it in the description. We're gonna get into it. I think. Well, you already know how I feel about it. We can tell if you put Android Saga Vegeta up against Future Gohan. We already know because there's a lot of evidence that proves that Vegeta was even with Future Android 18, but the only thing that was really getting in the way was his stamina. They were even as far as, and she couldn't take them all on. That's why if they jumped in, 17 would jump in. That's why he jumped in. He said, if y'all intervene in their fight, I'm gonna jump in. But because they wanted to keep it fair, because Vegeta was even with 18, he was a lot stronger in this timeline. But it's just his stamina drain. Eventually, he got so strong to where it didn't matter. So, but anyway, we're gonna get into the video.
Crazy, but people forget that this is a dude who was fighting killer.
Don't start from the beginning. Hold on. Let's see something.
Alright, so today we're going to be talking about something that
There we
doesn't
go.
get brought up enough. Future Gohan versus Android Saga Vegeta. And yeah, before anyone jumps to
We all know he gets one shot.
conclusions, we're going to scale both of them properly. So no headcanon nonsense. No what if he trained more hypotheticals just based on what we know and what the series shows us. Future Gohan is often downplayed because he doesn't have any on-screen feats that go crazy, but people forget that this is a dude who was fighting killer androids alone for years, lost an arm and still kept going. He's essentially the last real fighter.
That's a feat in itself. He fought both of those androids by himself. So that's a good feat in itself. Because I don't think Goku from this universe could have done that. I honestly don't. I don't see him doing that. Like Goku, like when he first got back from Yard Rat, I don't see Goku doing that. Now he may have been able to. I just said I don't see him doing that. But anyway, let's keep going.
Fighter in his timeline. No backup, no sensu beans, no hyperbolic time chamber. He was surviving in constant war conditions, which forces growth in a way characters in the main.
Now, what I do know is that Goku, if Goku was around, he would have brought up the hyperbolic time chamber. Gohan didn't know about the time chamber, so that's why he had to keep fighting without it. He didn't know anything about it. Kami wasn't there, but he could have, even though he didn't know about it, I mean, if he'd known about it, he could have accessed it. But if Goku was around, he would have mentioned it. And I don't think Goku would have let Piccolo fight the androids, knowing that Dragon Balls, if he found out how strong the androids were, he wouldn't have allowed Piccolo to go into battle, knowing that or he would have went and looked for another guardian. He would have tried to stall for time, like because every time Goku's around, he'd stall for time and try to use. He always try to find a way to utilize the Dragon Ball. He would never put the Earth in a position without Dragon Balls. So there'd be a huge difference if Goku was there. But Gohan, he didn't have that knowledge and those resources about. He didn't know about the time chamber. There's a lot of things he didn't know about. Didn't have instant transmission, so he couldn't have gone to New Namek and gotten some more gotten Dende and things like that. So Goku just had a lot of resources. He was that guy. He had resources that the other Z fighters just didn't have.
Main timeline have never had to deal with. Now, Vegeta during the Android Saga is a completely different story. This is a version of Vegeta who broke his limits out of pure rage and Saiyan pride. He hit Super Saiyan and immediately body bags Android 19 like it's nothing. His confidence is through the roof for a reason. He's got the power to back it up. The real question here is, can the future timeline's experienced and battle-tested grit overcome the raw power and ruthless drive of Vegeta and his prime?
No.
We're going to look at their scaling feats and statements because
That's just a clear answer. No.
one of these guys walk out of the fight on top, and it might not be who you think.
Vegeta still has more battle experience. In spite of Gohan's years of war with the android, Vegeta still has more battle experience. Even if they were even in power, Vegeta's a more tactical fighter. because he's a battle tactician. Of course, Gohan can. This Gohan, future Gohan, is a better fighter than present Gohan. He's a much better fighter. I'll give it that. But he just didn't have the power. That's the only thing. He lacked the power that the present fighters had because, you know, they just trained harder. For one, they knew the androids were coming, and two, they had the hyperbolic time chamber, all this other stuff in the place, sensu beans, Zenkais. They would exploit Zenkais, and it's a lot of things they knew about that the new age people didn't know about. I mean, that the future Trunks, future Gohan, they didn't have those resources. So yeah, Gohan gets mollywopped easily.
One of the first things that needs to be addressed when comparing future Gohan and Android Saga Vegeta is how drastically the outcome of this matchup can vary depending on whether you're looking at the anime or the manga. So let's begin by focusing on the anime.
Gohan loses in both.
And then tackle the manga afterwards. A major point of interest comes from a statement Trunks makes during the Android Saga, where he notes that the androids in the present timeline seem to be much stronger than the ones in the future. He says this shortly after being overwhelmed by Androids 17 and 18. At first glance, this sounds like a straightforward comparison, but when you break it down, the statement doesn't fully hold up under scrutiny.
Ba-bum. At Byberg Small Business Insurance, we cover all kinds of small businesses.
Don't care.
For starters, the android's energy cannot be sensed through traditional key detection methods. So when Trunks says this, both when reflecting on the androids from his future and during his encounter with the ones in the present, he isn't exactly basing the statement on any measurable power level. He's instead making a judgment based on the experience of the battle. Since he now knows how strong he and Vegeta are and remembers how he fought back then, he assumes the present androids must be stronger because the fight felt more intense. Trunks even adds that at the very...
Well, no, he's talking about the manga, but in the anime, he says they're stronger because Trunks got one shot by the androids. He said at least they would put up a decent fight in this future, but I mean in the past, and they were killers. They were stone cold killers and murderers and ruthless. If they wanted you dead, they just kill you. But the future androids, they were just dicking around and just one shot everybody. They weren't even using a fraction of their power. She might have been fighting. Android 18 might have been fighting, against Vegeta, but she like one shot Trunks. She swung Vegeta into Trunks and just one shot him. I mean, so there's a thing right there. That's something to compare it to.
At the very least, he was able to hold his own against the future androids. But this again doesn't align with what we actually see. In the history of Trunks Special, Trunks is constantly outmatched and overpowered.
But there's a lot of it didn't show everything. The history of Trunks, it just shows 3 years later after he got beat up, he got his tail whooped. It just shows sometime later. It didn't really, he just got in the time machine and went. But there was probably some gaps in there. But he was able to hold his own. But then there are a lot of different versions, even in the show. There were different versions of it. It showed all kind of different versions of the Z fighters being killed and how everything was in the future. It was different. It was like 2 or 3 versions even within the series where they were showing about the androids and how So that's hard to go off too. So it was just like they were trying to piece it all together.
In their final confrontation, Trunks is running for his life inside a destroyed building while the androids are practically treating the encounter like a game, mocking him and toying with him.
So his encounter with the androids in the manga, you can't really compare it to this because there's also a special in the manga. So if you're going to use the manga, there's also a special in the manga, and it didn't show everything in the manga. It didn't show any of this stuff. You see what I'm saying? So, so there are different encounters and stuff. So we can't even say that he got stronger or anything like that.
At any turn. Later, when Trunks returns to the future and defeats them, the androids are surprised that he's even still alive after their last encounter. Android 17 even comments on how much he's improved when he sees Trunks blocking Android 18's attacks, which were enough to anger her, something that he hadn't done in their previous battles. This clearly implies that Trunks had never come close to matching them before. If anything, he barely survived. So Trunks never saw the full extent of the android's power during his time, making his comparison between the timelines kind of flawed. At best, the only thing he could say really is that the present-day androids showed more of their strength than the future counterparts did during their earlier fights. This isn't the only time Trunks makes a questionable call, however. During 18's battle with Vegeta, Trunks is impressed by Vegeta's strength, mainly because he's surprised to see someone seemingly holding their own against an android. But even this impression is misleading. Moments later, Piccolo points out that Vegeta's stamina is gradually depleting.
But this is with Trunks. This is the thing. Trunks had any mentor, but and also too, I'm gonna cover a video about Trunks. I'm gonna cover a point about Trunks bulking up against Cell and how people call him stupid for it. But you gotta understand, Trunks only mentor Trunks ever had was Gohan. He never had any. He didn't have any long-term battle experience. Only battle experience he ever had was with the androids. Cause you got Vegeta. He conquered planets for a living. He had more battle experience. You have Goku. He had more battle experience. He'd been fighting all his life, battle after battle after battle after battle. So they knew they were like masters of fighting. But at a certain point, they were masters. They had mastered the art of fighting. Like Piccolo and people like that. He has hundreds of years worth of wisdom when it comes to fighting and martial arts and just wisdom in general. So, because he has the knowledge of Kame, he has the knowledge of Nail, and the power boost from those mergers. So, they're way more experienced than him. So, it's not fair to call Trunks dumb for not knowing certain things when only people he's ever fought was the creations of Dr. Zero. He just never really fought anybody outside of Frieza. We talk about Frieza, King Cold, and he was just so much stronger than them. It didn't matter. So he never had any real masters. They expected Trunks people expect Trunks to, you should know these things and know everything, and he doesn't have a lot of experience. And then even in this, he was just a kid. So there was no, how could he get all that wisdom when he never had anybody teach him? Just like people say Supreme Kai is incompetent. He never had, all his mentors were murdered, were slaughtered. Who was going to train him? No one trained him. He couldn't be trained. The Grand Supreme Kai sacrificed themselves. They sacrificed themselves so the Supreme Kais could live on. But he never, you know what I'm saying? So there was no one left to teach him anything. How can you learn anything if you don't even know what you're, it's sure he had a long time, but there's nobody to mentor him. I don't care how long you do something. If there was no one there to show you certain things, you're not going to know. It's going to be a lot of things you don't know. Of course, you can mature into the role, but there's also a lot you're not going to know. Things that other Supreme Kais do know, you're not going to know a lot of it. But now, of course, he has the old Kai to teach him some stuff and show him the ropes because he's 15 generations up. He can show him some things. But anyway, we're going to get back to the video. I'm rambling. It goes back to people are expecting characters in Dragon Ball that have no mentors to know a lot of stuff. Trunks didn't have, only person Trunks had was Gohan. No one else really trained and taught him anything. That's why even a year he spent in a time chamber with Vegeta trained alone. Trunks had to learn everything. Trunks had to learn by himself. So he just really, and Vegeta was so cold and distant, he didn't really teach him anything. You know what I'm saying? So who was there to really teach him? Now, if Vegeta had trained him and worked with him on, had trained with him and sparred with him and fought with him, and he probably could have showed him different weaknesses and transformations. But he was so cold and distant. But this is still Vegeta in his earlier stage. He had just left. You had just left from the Namek arc 3 years ago. 3 years prior, 4 years prior. 4 years prior, he was trying to kill everybody. You know what I'm saying? Fight Frieza, get immortality, fight Frieza, and he was still pretty evil. And even in the Android arc, he's still kind of evil. Still kind of a dick to everybody. So I can't expect him to try to train Trunks either. Somebody he just met and he finds out, oh, this is your son from the future. It takes time. So a lot of this stuff makes sense when you really just look at it with a view of common sense. I don't expect Trunks to know this stuff. I just don't expect him to know it. I don't expect. I cut him slack. Or he should have known he couldn't bulk up against Cell. How? No one ever taught him this. He just thought power. He just wanted the nightmare to be over. He had to learn things. Even in the Cell arc, he had to learn. Okay, Gohan did it right. He ascended right. He increased his strength without sacrificing his speed. Trunks had to learn these things on his own. A lot of things he had to learn on his own. And he was getting called stupid for it. And because Vegeta called, are you that dense? Are you stupid? No, he's really not. He didn't have anybody. Trunks didn't have nobody to show him nothing. He had to figure all this crap out. He was trying to learn and figure. He never had anybody to show him anything. Imagine you go through your life. A lot of things nobody really ever taught you. You didn't have a father. You had one mentor. He got killed. So I don't expect him to know these things. He's not dumb. He's just inexperienced. Vegeta is experienced in battle. I don't expect someone with no experience to know things that I should know when I have years of experience. By this time, Vegeta had been already conquering planets and he had mastered the Great Ape transformation. By this time, he transformed into a Super Saiyan and learned how to control the transformation because, according to some sources at first, you can't really just transform into it on your own because it took Goku. Goku said at first it happened, but now it took him some time to just be able to transform into it at will. So that's another step that you have to take. So you just can't. I don't expect Trunks to just know everything with no battle experience really outside of the androids. I just don't expect him to know those things. And people just all I say is cut Trunks some slack. He had to learn. He had to learn some things. He had to get experience in battle just like everybody else. Piccolo had years of experience. Goku had years of experience. All these people came from Dragon Ball. Krillin has more battle experience than Trunks does. Krillin has more battle experience than Trunks. Yamcha has more fighting experience than Trunks. Even though he lost a lot, he still has more experience than Trunks. He's been on the battlefield more than Trunks has. So, Tien Shinhan has more fighting experience. All of them do, because they train under masters and their whole childhood, their whole lives. I think Trunks may have had less than a year of training, less than 1 year, less than he didn't have a lot of training. He didn't have because he was killed. Trunks was little. I think he was 12 or 14 when he got 14 or something like that. I think he was about 14. When his master Gohan got killed. Then 3 years later, he challenged the androids after he became Super Saiyan. So, I don't even think he had a year worth of training. Just think about it like that. Cut my boy Trunks some slack.
Android 18 having infinite energy isn't getting tired at all. This often leads people to wrongly assume the two were on equal footing, with stamina being the only factor separating them. But that's simply not accurate. It isn't until Piccolo merges with Kami and faces off against Cell that Android 16 makes a noteworthy comment, stating that someone had
and 17 at this point was at full power. So Piccolo merged with Kami is even with 17. It's just that Piccolo was losing. Piccolo had the same problem that Vegeta had against 18. But that's how you are able to scale it. Because even in the anime, 17 was like, okay, I'm going to go full power if you don't mind. He was going all out against 17. That's why Cell came back and was dog walking both of them. 17's power capped at Piccolo's. Piccolo at full power after he merged with Kami they were about even. There's sources that confirm that. You can watch the anime and see it for yourself that they were even. Just Piccolo had the stamina drain. Just like 18 and Vegeta. The gap between 17 and 18 is the same gap between Super Saiyan Vegeta and Piccolo merged with Kami. The same gap. Same power gap. That's how you can gauge the android powers. 16 had an even greater power. Whew.
Finally emerged with an
He was even with Cell, Imperfect Cell, after he had absorbed all those people. And dog walked. So Android 16 could have dog walked 17 and Piccolo together. If 16 been fighting them instead of Imperfect Cell, it'd have been the same result. So there's some more scaling in there for you.
enough power to rival the android.
It shows you right in the anime, you know, how to scale him. It's right there in the anime.
This clearly places Kami Fused Piccolo as the benchmark. So unless you think Super Saiyan Vegeta was stronger than or equal to a fused Piccolo, which even Vegeta himself admits isn't the case.
He was even to 18. And 17 is stronger than 18. So, no.
Then Vegeta was never close to matching Android 18. And all
Yeah, he was. 18 is not equal to 17. 17 is stronger. Yeah, he was stronger. But here's the thing. His stamina, he hadn't mastered Super Saiyan. So when you hadn't mastered Super Saiyan, it drains ki. See, Goku, that's what Goku's idea was going into the time chamber and turning Super Saiyan, staying Super Saiyan to where it's your base form, so now it's not draining you. But Vegeta hadn't mastered it yet, so he's still Super Saiyan grade 1. So he was fighting on par. He was on par with 18. It's just he was losing stamina. Because Piccolo said, okay, he's dropping stamina. He's losing stamina while 18 stays strong. That's the problem Piccolo saw. Trunks looked at the battle and said, okay, he's holding his own with 18. He's holding his own with the android. Piccolo's like, no, eventually his stamina's gonna run out. You gotta watch closely. So I'm just going off the anime. I ain't using nothing extra out on the outside. Just going off what they showing in the anime. Because everything else that's not being shown or stated by the writers or the source material is just, it's just making stuff up.
All this points to one conclusion. Trunks, while experienced, doesn't have the most reliable track record when it comes to assessing power levels.
Trunks was inexperienced. He didn't have a lot of experience.
His belief that the present
And you can't sense the androids, so there's no way to really know how strong they are. Only way to know how strong they are was to use the fights in the anime, because 17 went full power against Piccolo, and 18 it was already noted that 18 couldn't beat all of the Z fighters by herself.
androids are significantly stronger than the future ones is based more on perception and incomplete information than an actual measurement difference. So the statement,
The future androids were weaker.
and while interesting, doesn't carry as much weight as it might seem at first glance.
They're weaker.
Now, with all that said, it's worth pointing out that Android 18 herself does acknowledge
But they're still around in the same ballpark. They're not like significantly so overpoweringly weaker. It didn't make much of a difference.
Vegeta's strength to some extent. During their fight, she mentioned that she didn't expect to be pushed this far by a man. However, she quickly follows that up by saying that if this is all he has, then he's not much of a threat, and proceeds to break his arm and completely incapacitate him.
She did all that to tear Vegeta's ego, just to mess up his ego. Because she still was at full strength. Vegeta's strength was probably in half at this point. He had thrown a big bang attack and was fighting, and at full force, he probably had his strength cut in half.
Even so, Vegeta's strength during this point in the story shouldn't be underestimated. Piccolo notes that following the 3 years of training leading up to the arrival of the androids, Vegeta had managed to surpass Goku. Considering Piccolo had spent those 3 years alongside Goku, his assessment holds some weight. This is further
And the manga, so there it is in the manga with Piccolo sparring with Super Saiyan Goku. That's how Piccolo got so strong in the manga. I mean, that's how he got stronger than was able to manhandle Dr. Zero, because he had already been sparring with a Super Saiyan for 3 years.
supported by Goku himself, who comments that if Vegeta can't handle the android, then he probably won't be able to either.
Thinking about grad school?
Yep.
UMGC is waiving their application fee through May 30th.
He wasn't just
Low-cost
exponentially
tuition,
stronger.
100% online, and master's degrees.
He wasn't
At the very
exponentially.
least, this suggests
He wasn't exponentially stronger, so much stronger that it just, he can't just one shot Goku, but he has surpassed Goku.
Just a level of relativity between the two. In fact, nearly everyone is surprised by how much stronger Vegeta has become, far beyond what was expected of him. Now, switching the focus to future Gohan, things become a bit more nuanced. A quote that often comes up in discussions is when Gohan explains why he wears his gi resembling Goku's. He says that he designed it in that way because he hoped to one day be as strong as Goku was, but admits that he hasn't been successful in that regard. This indicates
So he never made it to be as strong as Goku's strongest point was. After he came back from Yard Drag, he never made it to that strength level.
that at the time of making the statement, future Gohan didn't believe he had reached the level Goku had attained before dying from the heart virus. However, it's important to note that Gohan does continue to go stronger after Goku's death. In fact, he clearly improves over time, especially after losing his arm in his final confrontation with the androids.
Oh yeah, he was mad stronger then. He came back and mollywopped the androids.
Despite being outnumbered, Gohan puts up a significantly better fight than he did in previous encounters and is shown winning a beam struggle between the two. So while he may have felt inferior to Goku at the time of that comment, it's entirely plausible that later on he closed the gap, or even surpassed him before dying.
Could have.
Another key detail is that Gohan wasn't necessarily referring to Yardrat Goku as many fans assume. Goku spent 3 years training in preparation for the android, so it's
Well, in this, I say this, in the future timeline, he didn't train like that. Because you could say that, but he didn't train like because he didn't know the androids were coming. The present timeline, they trained harder because of everything. Because they knew the androids were coming, so they decided to train harder to fight them. So it's been shown in the series when they train to meet a goal, like when the Z fighters trained for the Saiyans, they trained a lot harder, and they actually surpassed Goku when he fought Raditz. And when they trained with King Kai, they surpassed Goku when he trained with King Kai. They always, because they had a goal in mind when they trained. When they trained with King Kai, when they ran out Snake Way and all of that, they was aiming to surpass Goku. So so that's why they got so much stronger. So Goku and the D Fighter, they were aiming to actually fight the androids. They had a goal in mind. They knew, okay, the androids are even stronger than Frieza. So now we got to train hard to beat an enemy that's stronger than Frieza. We have to get on that level to even be in the same playground. So they had a goalpost. Frieza was the goalpost. It had to be stronger than Frieza. Of course, the other Z fighters they might not have gotten to be stronger than Frieza, but they trained as hard as they could to try to get, make some kind of a difference.
It's only natural that he grew stronger in that time. Even in future Trunks' timeline where Goku wasn't aware of the android threat, he likely continued to train, as simply that's part of his nature. Saiyans constantly push their...
But he didn't train as hard as the present Goku did because there was not a threat. There's no immediate threat. He probably did some sparring and things like that, some light sparring, but he didn't train. They didn't start training hard like that until Goku didn't start training extra super hard until the time chamber when Cell was a threat. He trained hard with Gohan in the time chamber, and then he trained hard in the 7 years when he died, because he had a heavenly body. He could train 24/7 without tiring. He probably stopped to get something to eat, and he could start back training. He could train 24/7.
Their limits through battle, and Goku is no exception. So while Gohan's statement implies he was weaker than Goku at one point, it doesn't mean that remained true indefinitely. As time passed and Gohan continued to battle, especially under extreme conditions, it's likely he experienced significant growth, his own evolution, even in the harsh future timeline, which shouldn't be overlooked. Now, when comparing future Gohan and Android Saga Vegeta, one of the most reliable ways to gauge their relative strength is by analyzing how they performed against the androids, who act as a power benchmark between them. In Vegeta's case, although Android 17 does complement his performance as being impressive, it's made clear that Vegeta still falls short of being able to defeat either 18 or 17 on his own. Meanwhile, future Gohan is shown in both his major confrontations with the androids to be significantly more capable. Even with just one arm in his final battle, he manages to overwhelm them individually and only falls after being ambushed by both siblings working together in perfect coordination. This paints a very clear picture. Gohan holds a considerable advantage in terms of power and effectiveness. Not only did the androids feel the need to jump him in both encounters, but he also was able to draw blood from both of them at multiple occasions. The only real argument that could shift the outcome in Vegeta's favor comes from Trunks' statement about the androids in the future being weaker than their counterparts in the present timeline. If you take that claim at face value, then Vegeta's struggle against the androids in the main timeline might be more excusable, and a stronger case could be made for him winning, since Gohan would be doing better against weaker androids. But if you disregard that statement, especially considering Trunks had no real way to gauge their power accurately, it becomes difficult to argue against Gohan.
Well, it was stated for a reason. That's all I say. It was stated for a reason. They just used Trunks as exposition to mention that. So we can't just ignore. We can't pick and choose which statements to take serious and which ones to not take serious. Because Trunks was inaccurate, and this one didn't. No, it was stated for a reason. So just like Goku saying he could have defeated Majin Buu, it was stated for a reason. He probably could have beat Majin Buu. It might be crazy. It might sound all this and this and that, but it was stated for a reason. Oh, he's just saying that. No. No. It was in there. The writers put it in there for a reason, because they wanted you to know that the future android, these androids are even stronger than the androids that Trunks fights, because he can hold his own against those androids just like Gohan did. Because I don't think the TV special even came out yet. I think the TV special didn't come out until around the Cell games, like in America now. The TV special didn't come out to around the Cell games, so it hadn't even been written yet. So he was able to hold his own against the androids, but in these he got one shot. So they were significantly stronger, according to Trunks, according to the statement. So I'm just saying, it's just like Gohan was able to hold his own, but he got one shot. If Gohan was in the present timeline, he fought the androids, he probably got one shot.
Vegeta's individual dominance against the androids compared to Gohan's need to be tag team suggests Gohan would win quite convincing.
I don't think so.
You run a small business and have employees like me always wanting to be hands-on and learn more skills. Ooh, ductwork.
I don't think so.
But depending on how you interpret Trunks' statement, or if you give it validity, Vegeta may have the edge here.
Vegeta wins, hands down.
Now, in the manga, the matchup plays out very differently, depending on how you interpret certain elements. While many of the same statements are consistent with the anime, there's a few key differences. For one, Gohan's remark about not being as strong as Goku is placed just before his final encounter with the androids. An encounter that doesn't reflect too well on him. In fact, Android 17 is able to kill Gohan on his own without assistance from 18, and even comments that during their previous encounter, he was only using half of his strength. This heavily downplays Gohan's performance in the manga and suggests that he's much weaker here compared to his anime counterpart. Additionally, the manga doesn't show Trunks fighting the androids. Without that scene, it becomes much more plausible that Trunks might have had a closer encounter with them, leading more credibility to his statement that the androids of the future were weaker than those in the main timeline. This could potentially shift the scales in Vegeta's favor. It's reasonable to assume that in the manga timeline, Vegeta was at least approaching Goku's level before the heart virus took effect, mainly due to his competitive nature and desire to become a Super Saiyan. While he might not have grown as much as he did in the main timeline, it's hard to imagine him slacking off entirely in his pursuit of power. However, there's another wrinkle to consider. In the Dragon Ball Super manga, there's a brief panel showing the Z fighters battling the androids in the future timeline, and notably, Vegeta is not shown using Super Saiyan. If you interpret this as canonical to the original Dragon Ball Z timeline, it adds a major blow to Vegeta's case.
Super is not even freaking canon to the original. So I don't even use Super anymore.
A non-Super
I just Super as his own thing.
Saiyan Vegeta, regardless of his efforts, likely wouldn't be able to defeat future Gohan. Of course, that all depends on whether you view that Super manga chapter as connected to the original timeline. If it is, then Gohan decisively wins. If not, then you believe Vegeta had access to Super Saiyan in the manga continuity, and the edge might lean towards him. They do look pretty beat up in that manga chapter, so it's very possible that Vegeta wasn't Super Saiyan, but due to fighting fatigue, it wore off. All things considered, future Gohan seems to have a stronger case for victory in the anime version of the events, and in the
Vegeta was a Super Saiyan because it wasn't Super was his own thing. In the Dragon Ball manga, Vegeta was a Super Saiyan.
The manga, the outcome is far more dependent on your interpretation of the source material, making it a situation where the winner flips entirely based on what continuity and details you choose to accept. Ultimately, it becomes a fight that's not even close, just in very different directions depending on the version you're analyzing.
Vegeta. But if you let me know what you think in the comments. I'm siding with Vegeta on this one. I'm sorry, because the androids were weaker. They made the statement for a reason. I'm not gonna ignore a statement, because you can't add Super to it, because Toriyama had nothing to do with Super really. You can't add all these extra different outside sources, GT and all these other stuff. All that stuff's separate from Dragon Ball. You got to base it off just Dragon Ball Z and the manga if you're gonna do it. But anyway, that's been it for this one. I think one more I was gonna do today before it was over with, but it wasn't gonna be a versus thing, but it was gonna be. I saw another video with the Goku Invincible crossover, and I wanted to cover that one. But I was gonna do that for the day's over. But that's been it for this one. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. That do you agree, disagree, whatever you think, catch you on the next one.